Well, welcome. I think we can begin to introduce the event. This event is being live recorded, and we anticipate it being shared with organizations, local authorities in the thousands around the world after this. But we are very, very happy to have you all with us. And this is obviously a really critical time, a moment of profound change and challenge for the world today. And if ever there was a need for our vision to be world embracing, even as we're dealing with our local challenges, this really is it. All our sort of local and national interactions are affected by global processes and global policies, and vice versa. The actions that we take locally and nationally affect the situation worldwide. And we are all anxiously concerned with the needs of the world that surround us at the moment. So we are very privileged to be able to have some truly fantastic perspectives from around the world. And in terms of gathering some of the learning as to how we have so far now addressed the challenges of COVID-19 and the role in particular that digital technology has played. And we have a particular focus, of course, on local authorities and local communities and how this perspective sort of aggregates. And the bad news, of course, is that we are in the throes of a revival of COVID around the world, and lockdowns are resuming, and sort of the viruses are spreading. We're talking about second waves. We also have the advantage that we have some learning, that we have gone through some experiences, and that we are not reacting in the same kind of vacuum. So this is the context for this event, is to try and derive some lessons from these processes and frame them in the wider global challenges. So I would like to begin by inviting Emilia Says from the United Cities and Local Government. We are extremely fortunate to have such a fantastic speaker and such a fantastic organization. The United Cities and Local Governments is the largest network of subnational governments in the planet. They represent something like 2/3 of humanity. And Emilia, who is a jurist by profession, has devoted her life to promoting the role of local governments in development, as well as fostering relations between cities and their associations worldwide. Her mission as Secretary General of United Cities and Local Governments started in 2018. When asked about her priorities for the coming year, which is something we will explore in more detail, she mentions that in particular, she's motivated by ensuring that the global agendas are built from local priorities, and that international action of local governments is understood as indispensable. And we certainly at Booking Live consider it indispensable and are extremely fortunate to be able to welcome Emilia. Emilia, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ismail. It's exciting to be with each other in these trying times, isn't it? I mean, also very uncertain times. We actually do not know what hit us. And I don't think that we comprehend really what is going to happen with us and how this all is going to affect us. So I think that it is very important to keep talking to each other and to keep analyzing what the different priorities are. Because if we don't do that, we might not use the crisis as we should. Let's see. This is a context, as I was saying, that none of us expected to be in. It's not the first worldwide crisis that we are facing. So it's not even the first big pandemic that we are facing. But this is probably the first one that is truly universal. And in this context, we have put a magnifying glass in many of our priorities, many of our weaknesses as well. I mean, we knew that there were things that we were not doing well. Inequality, this persisting inequality that is a building block of all of our societies. And I say building block because many of our societies are built on the notion that there will be the have-nots that are actually maintaining the structure. So it has shown those weaknesses. We see it now more clearly, and we have also seen clearly what some of the ways out can be. Now, the big challenge is going to be now whether we are going to actually make use of these things that we are learning. And my organization, as you say, very broad, very diverse, very heterogeneous, over 250,000 members across the world, has been trying to get together and make sure that we learn from each other. And among the priorities that we have identified, which is combating inequalities, making sure everybody has a home, a decent home to live in, so stop evictions basically, and continue delivering public services such as water, sanitation, and waste. But there is also a very strong perspective that has come in. The world kept turning because public service delivery was there, but also because technology has been there. And we have started to look at technology from a very different perspective, both in the global north and the global south. There are many good things about technology that we are now putting into practice. And I say we have maintained our communities. People have been building on culture through technology. We have continued to school many of our children through technology. We have kept the job market going because of technology. But all of this is a very small part of reality, because technology has been working well for the formal sector of our societies. And guess what? The formal sector of the world is less than 40% actually. I mean, the biggest part of us, of all of us, of humanity, is informal. And that informality is making use of technology, but not through the mainstream that we are looking at in the rest of the world. And I think this is very important for our conversation. Yes, technology is good. Yes, technology is allowing us to teach children. Yes, we need to make sure that we distribute tablets. Yes, we need to learn online. Yes, all of this, yes. But how do you approach that in the informality sector? And those are the people that do not have a house and that cannot stay there to learn or to work, and that depend from mobile connections to actually all of this, to do all of this. And that is the part that I think an organization like United Cities and local governments needs to look at. Obviously, we are accompanying the champions, you know, the Amsterdams, the Helsinkis, the Barcelona, the New Yorks, all of these great local leaders that are looking at how to open up algorithms. And Helsinki and Amsterdam have taken a very important step in this. They are disclosing the algorithms that they are utilizing to govern. Groundbreaking, if you ask me. In Spain, municipalities such as Barcelona are pushing for government to guarantee access to internet for everybody, for everyone, for every single one, and pushing the providers to deliver on that before they sign the contracts. They are developing in Spain also with the support of cities, new digital rights charter. What does it all entail? So these are the champions, right? And we need to follow that. And these are societies that have a mainstream access, even if not equal to technology. But there is a very large reality that is not there yet. I think we need to take the responsibility for that part. We need to support the champions, but we need to look at that part of informality. And how are we going to deal with that? And how are their rights protected if we go too fast into a technology society? That's the part that is concerning me most. We are also convinced in the international municipal movement that we will need to answer some tough questions about what does a technological world mean for citizenship. Can you maintain the same type of citizenship concept in a world where the borders are not existing? Like we are experiencing now, you know, time zones are diffused. My job does not relate to a one time zone only because we are a global organization. Still, I am in one time zone, which is Barcelona. Can we say that people need to answer to the logic of territorial borders when in fact they can be seen as global citizens when they shop in a global platform? So can they have more rights as buyers than as citizens globally? Is that acceptable for the future? We think not. And so these are the type of things that we are starting to look at. If we come down to reality now, to what we are going through now, and all these broad ideas are very much part of reality, because we are faced with this type of problems every day. But if we look at very specific issues, access remains a big problem. So we need to have a different type of dialogue with the private sector. And this is not happening yet. It's happening in some places, but not broadly enough. We will also need to define privacy in a different manner, and disclosure on algorithms and the backstage of technology will be very important before our governments, and in particular the local governments, can actually put to use everything that is available. The third thing is the development of applications, just like we are seeing now with the vaccine, will need to be much more open, particularly applications that are related to the use of the commons and to public service delivery. So that's another very big concern that we have. And then, well, a redefinition, a new generation of human rights related to technology, which is related to all of the above, but also a new concept of being, of considering humanity. So there is where we are, and I think these conversations are very relevant at this very moment, where we are hit very hard by a health crisis that is becoming a full-fledged social crisis and is questioning our whole system. The good part of the news is we've got an excellent framework, I think, ambitious global framework, which are the Sustainable Development Goals, which we are convinced are still valid. And if we make sure that that framework is looked at as a guideline and we invest more in it, I think we can go very far. Then the second good news is, wow, we have a great coalition of the willing. There are so many people that want to change it and that want to do it right. that gives us a lot of hope. And then thirdly, we can't simply not afford to, because it's not only about what we are doing in this generation, but we are actually using the resources of many other generations to come. So we actually need to make the right investments. And if you ask me, a different approach to technology will be very critical. So I'll stop there for now, because I can go on for hours. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. That's been a really sort of profound and fantastic overview, and of both the strengths but also the challenges. That element of the sort of substantial informal economy, really, and sort of the elements of access, and the importance of the need for sort of private sector and technology companies like ours to have those dialogues at the level of policy and planning with local authorities and governments, and national as well and international, but also the relevance and significance of the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework that actually allows all of these sort of diverse actors to come together and coordinate in a systematic way that integrates organically and adds up. And I think that closing note of the significance of those Sustainable Development Goals is a fantastic opportunity. So I think sort of what I will do now is begin by sort of giving sort of our own presentation, which follows quite closely, I think, with Emilia's presentation, because we are, in a sense, coming to this from the other end of the spectrum. We are coming to this from the perspective of technology actors who have been engaging with local authorities and other bodies around the world. So this has allowed us to gain an element of learning about the challenges from our end, as it were, and what we have observed from our partners. What are the systemic challenges that face local authorities, and I think other actors as well, but primarily we're focusing here on local authorities. And it kind of echoes some of the dimensions that have been raised already. And what are the challenges ahead as we understand them? So the first one is the recovery challenge. We have millions of people, public services and businesses that have suspended work. So safely reopening the economy depends on making services and venues COVID secure. So local governments and national governments around the world are facing this challenge. How do we maintain physical distance? How do we limit the number of people that individuals come into contact? How do we shift patterns to reduce occupancy? So if before you had 300 people in a building at the same time, how do you sort of now rotate them so that not everyone is there at the same time? And obviously minimizing the need to physically queue and have all of these elements that break social distancing. And lockdown policies are essentially ways of trying to foster this at scale. But we also, as we have found now, when I began to sort of prepare this talk, we were still in the recovery stage. But really this I had outlined the resilience challenge, and actually events have overtaken me. And from the talk, really, this should be the first slide and the other one, the second slide, because actually we're back to second waves and we're back to second lockdowns. And what we found in the last lockdown and in the last sort of crisis recovery and crisis response stage was that the pandemic stretched the logistics of society to breaking points. And that out of all of the various society organizations and local authorities, the ones which had advanced digital transformation proved the most resilient. So local public services that depended on face-to-face, on sort of a large sort of body of people taking phone calls, those struggled with lockdown and public services were interrupted. Those that had successful digital services and digital access to citizens and digital citizenship in place were much more resilient when it came. So crisis preparedness for second waves and future crises involve partly automating processes for accessing essential public services. So you are not broken by the fact that suddenly your staff have to work from home or are sick and cannot come. So being able to access public services digitally has proven to increase resiliency. Integrating fragmented supply chains, volunteer staff, medical supplies, donations, having a way of processing all of these things at once can be of great help. So one of the things that we found was that when COVID hit, there was a need, for example, for personal protection equipment or tests or all kinds of things. And there were hundreds of companies offering their services to governments, but governments were overwhelmed by their inability to deal with 100 offerings at once or 1,000 offerings at once. There was little cognitive bandwidth. So the ability to have integrated chains that allow us to respond quickly and harness citizen power and private sector contributions became a key element of crisis readiness. And finally, the challenge of freeing up staff from routine queries to concentrate on emergency queries. This was another challenge that we found our local government partners struggled with. So who are we and sort of where does our learning about these issues, the presentation that I'm giving is what we have learned about how some of these challenges can be addressed. We are sort of the #1 public sector booking and scheduling and reservation provider in the UK and one of the top ones globally. We work around 63 countries and we have over 11 plus and growing product solutions to assist this digital infrastructure and transformation. And we work with SMEs and with large corporations. So that means that our learning comes from interactions with a really diverse cross-section of businesses, of governments, and of corporations who are addressing these issues of sort of managing contact and proximity through scheduling and are turning to us for solutions. The kinds of diversity you can see here, anything, we have worked with Microsoft and Universal Studios, all the way to local authorities, all the way to tiny small businesses, gyms, sort of transport, leisure, etc. So the insights that I will share are aggregating the learning from these diverse interactions that we have had. So during our experience through COVID, in particular, what we found was that there were these are the kinds of use cases. So one was automating public services, pest control, social housing maintenance, bulk waste collection, registrars, tree officers, childcare, taxi licensing. These were all things that people had to phone the local authority number, get to a local authority person who would then sort of process all of these things and manually set up these bookings. By automating all these essential public services, what that meant is that when COVID hit and sort of local authorities found themselves understaffed, for example, citizens were still able to maintain all of these essential things. And this speaks to that formal and informal point that Emilia raised before, that if the main local authority has the systems that allow, sort of whether formally or informally, the citizenship to have access and interact with local authorities, then this creates enormous resilience. So likewise, being able to automate appointments for surgeries, for counseling, for advice, being able to set up virtual meetings with your doctor or with your social worker, and being able to do all this without having to sort of flood the lines at emergency times, greatly sort of increase that resilience. Being able to manage, our solution has helped to manage capacity and density. So how to ensure that parks do not get over full, and if they are, or your beaches or your sort of public squares, and if they are, being able to have notifications that help you direct away business. These were some of the innovations we were exploring with our partners. Being able to allow small businesses to transition. So for instance, one local authority disseminated knowledge of our app to their local businesses, so they could go from, for example, tour operators that sort of before were business to business, were able to transition through our app through being able to get direct citizen engagement. So these are the kinds of ways in which this digital technology has been used to innovate local government services and achieve crisis preparedness or crisis response. Other areas have been rota management around offices and physical events and sort of hire bookings and supply chain management. There's a wide range of solutions. Now, in the process of making available the solutions, of problem solving together as a private technology company with local and national government partners, we found a number of challenges. One of the key challenges was rapid reaction. How do local and national governments commission and integrate new solutions at speed? We found that often we had the right solution to the problem, but the systems in place were too slow, so that the local authority partners that we had were, this is what we need and we need it now. But we don't have the systems to be able to process these offerings, not just from us, but from many other technology partners, fast enough to make a difference to the crisis. So creating more agile systems of local government and engagement with solution providers outside of the existing infrastructure is key. One of the things that we saw was that sometimes the wrong partners were commissioned, and this made headline news. But the reason these partners were commissioned was because they were already in their commissioning process. So even though there were better partners, better solutions out there, governments were not able to commission them at speed. So they went for trusted big partners who were improvising essentially new solutions that then came with side effects, whether that be in testing or in sort of protection equipment or many other areas. The second core systemic area that we found was fragmentation between departments and among supply chains. So there were no ways, there were no clear ways of sourcing solutions, either from the crowd through things like the global hack that Booking Live won. There was this fantastic, one of the largest global hacks in the world, where innovators around the world, supported by people like UNDP and the Sustainable Development Action Group like Marina, sort of enormous innovation came through. But making those innovations available and adoptable through the fragmentation of supply chains was a big challenge. So overcoming fragmentation in systems is one of the global challenges that we have for crisis preparedness and crisis response. And finally, maintaining strategic focus, being able to deal with these challenges, but also see that these are also opportunities to advance our agendas for empowering citizenship through digital transformation, for advancing the effectiveness of our public services. It's not just a crisis, but an opportunity. And an example of this, sort of one local authority that we collaborated with, who took a strategic as opposed to a reactionary approach or a reactive approach to this digital transformation, and use the challenges of COVID to say, actually, yes, let's react to this, but how do we also make this an opportunity to make access to public services more effective? And what we found was there was a 68% reduction in calls because citizens were able to proceed with public services directly without an intermediary. Most orders, even though the phone lines were available, shifted online. 88% shifted online. There was a 50% reduction in administrative tasks that's still rising. And advisors on lines found they had 29 hours reduced. So suddenly their ability to deal with the emergency grew dramatically. And of course, there were cost savings, and there was a huge increase. Similarly, the citizens themselves were much more satisfied with the new processes and with the ease of booking, and rated the system as good and above. So this shows that actually COVID is driving potentially changes that increase the ability of government to respond. So as an average here, just this is one example with our provision, but I think this applies to other good implementations of technology. There is time saved, there is self-services increased, and there is additional revenue where that is concerned. So this is it. It is just to say, therefore, that I think COVID presents to us enormous challenges, and that to ensure this social distancing and COVID security, having technological solutions, particularly around scheduling our interactions with one another and reducing physical cues, can be quite powerful. And that the challenges for government are their ability to interact and partner with us, as Emilia said, so that the vision is strategic and united. The ability to break through fragmentation and silos, both in the private sector and in the public sector, and our ability to grasp this crisis to drive through opportunities for change that leave us in a much more integrated society and a more united world. And this allows us then to move then to the framework for these changes, the framework for this collaboration between the private sector and the public sector, the framework that allows us to make this an opportunity to reinvent society in a strategic, positive way that uplifts us. And that is the Sustainable Development Goals. So I am very grateful to be able to welcome Marina Ponti to address us as the Director of the United Nations Sustainable Development Action Campaigns. As the Global Director, and before that, Deputy Director and Regional Director for Europe for over a decade, she has been in the vanguard of innovative campaign initiatives, building multi-holder coalitions, mobilizing resources, and forging long-term partnerships between civil society organizations, local government, parliamentarians, media, the private sector, and the UN. And of course, in driving our global awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals and translating it into reality. So Marina, welcome very much to this presentation.
Thank you, Ismail, and thank you, everyone. It's really an honor to be here. And for those who don't know, I met Ismail during the Global Hackathon, which we co-organized earlier this year. And in that occasion, where more than 15,000 people from across the globe joined during a holiday weekend to really hack ideas and solutions to address the crisis, but also to shift our society towards the Sustainable Development Goals. We as Action Campaign led one track, one challenge, which was the Solidarity in Action, and Booking Life was the winner. So congratulations again, Ismail, and your amazing team. I remember them very well.
Thank
so you mentioned, and also Emilia before, the Sustainable Development Goals, which were agreed by all heads of state a couple of days more than 5 years ago. And the world since then has changed so much. So none of us could have imagined 5 years ago that the world would have been turned upside down, because not only global pandemic that took away lives across the world, but most importantly, put the spotlight on the failures of our system and of our societies. We at the US SDG Action Campaign and believe along with many partners, that we are now in a very important time in history. We are the turning point for people and planet. The pandemic is a stark reminder of how connected we are. We have a once in a generation opportunity, and you said it before, to reimagine and create a better future. One that is more equal, more active on climate change, one that ends poverty and protect health. Why this opportunity? You know, overall, we see the leaders at all levels, you know, heads of state, local government, private sector, are back to the drawing board to find strategies to restart our economies and our lives. And somehow in this moment in history, where both societies at the macro level and also individual are frozen and are forced to reimagine how a different life could be, these are the moments in which transformative change is possible. Because now, and we've seen, of course, in different countries, different flows of resources, but governments have many more resources than they had before to really invest in certain sector. Now they can really make a change if they want to invest more in renewable energy, if they want to invest more in education, or what does it mean education now in this world? So invest in gender equality, protect women. We've seen during the lockdown an increase of 30% in gender-based violence. So we see now, although the challenges are very strong, we see the opportunity to make the transformative change that are needed. And so somehow, and I fully agree. I mean, Emilia was saying before how all governments at all levels, they now are really every day they are fighting to protect their citizens. And I think you, Emilia, in a different event, said a sentence that captured my heart, saying that the mayors and local government are the custodian of the dreams and the aspiration of each one of us. And somehow
the sentinels of the dreams.
the sentinel of the dreams. And somehow the SDG embodies those dreams. And now, and before the pandemic, somehow, I mean, we still had the SDG and still people had the dreams and passion, but many governments and many leaders also from the private sector were saying, oh, it's too costly. No, you know, to travel less, no, it's impossible. Or, you know, to invest in renewable, it's not possible. Or, so we now see that it's possible. Or many governments, I deal with many Western, you know, government, they were saying, oh, we cannot give more on education, on health. And now we see it's possible. And people were saying, oh, no, we cannot really limit the way we travel, the way we behave. And now we are all in a Zoom call instead of being in your town. So we see the transformative change. Not only is possible, but it's happening. But of course, we can, we now need to make sure that the transformation is going in the right direction. And when moments like today happen in the past, so when there is this freeze and at the same time this opportunity to reimagine, to reinvent, things can go very well. So we can really do a leap forward and bring our community, our society to that vision of the Agenda 2030. But things can go very bad, and we can go back into a world which is more divided, more unequal, even more than it is now, and a world that doesn't understand that how connected we are and see this connection as a threat rather than an opportunity. So somehow it's important when we talk about cooperation and dialogue between private sector, public sector, that we all need to raise our voices from our different roles to call for those bold decisions. So transformation is possible. The second opportunity that makes me optimistic is a new emphasis on individual action. And you see a butterfly on my back, which shows the butterfly effect, something which I strongly believe. And I think in the past, there was a lot of narrative about everybody can make a difference, but there was not, many people were very skeptic. And now we see in a pandemic that is affecting everyone, all the most important nation and continent and companies, that the only strategy we have is the individual behavior. Wearing a mask, keeping the physical distancing, washing your hand. So somehow the individual, the impact of our action as leverage power, and people now see that they can make a difference, and they can make a difference for the pandemic, and hopefully they can also make a difference for other issues. And it's not, to me, a coincidence that the Black Lives Matter movement was so powerful recently, and still is, because in a way the movement and the very, very sad fact and unjust fact that triggered it were also linked to the pandemic, because the pandemic put under the spotlight the deep inequality and unjust of our societies. And in those moments, it's easier to then, kind of trigger and create social unrest. But at the same time, the pandemic, because we all felt united, we all felt connected, digitally, as never before, allow for people to express, to communicate, and to feel part of this broader community, which is fighting the pandemic, but also fighting climate and social injustice. So I think this makes me very optimistic. And my last point is about global solidarity. And there has also been a kind of a greater emphasis on solidarity. We have seen during the pandemic, we see every day, but particularly at the beginning, how people spontaneously were helping, the elderly, or were helping those who didn't have, and were ensuring everybody had access to food and then to the basic services. And so that solidarity is there. And we have also seen, as DG Action Campaign supported the UN 75 survey and process that somehow generated more than 1 million response, and an overwhelming majority of people in the face of a pandemic believe that we need coordinated responses. We need global consensus. We need a dialogue, so that there are many, many, many people that really understood that you cannot address the pandemic in one country, you know, not even in a small town, because we need global solution. And that also is, to me, a sign of hope. And in a way, we also know, and we just had the last week, and Emilia was part of several events, and you know, an SDG action zone where the leader, the thinker across sector, you know, put forward the ideas that can go to scale to achieve the goals and to ensure a just and a sustainable recovery. So the topic, the solution are there, from fair taxation to equal pay for gender quota in public and private, to breaking the stereotypes, to ban on carbon subsidy, cutting emission, investing in renewable energy, changing, you know, supply chain that are, you know, green and fair. So we all have, the solution are there. And what we need is to make sure that the governments at all levels, not just local, but also national and global, keep their side of the bargain, of the commitment, and put the taxpayer money and policies towards people and the planet. And also the private sector. I mean, there is a lot that they can do in terms of changing the production partner, and making sure that the supply chain really transfer, you know, wealth and resources fairly, and also making sure that the kind of, there is a redistribution through taxation of you know, wealth and benefit that particularly large company can acquire. So there is so much that we can do, but I believe that there is a movement of people. We're not the only one in this call that believe that we are at a turning point, and that are ready to do whatever it takes at whatever level to make a difference and to bring us towards that more sustainable and more equitable world. And we have 10 years ahead of us. We can turn it around. And as Mandela taught us, it seems impossible until it's done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful note to end on. And indeed, I think it becomes clear from your discussion that even though we're all in different countries and locales, really, when it comes to these kinds of adaptive challenges, the Earth is one country, really, that and it calls on that citizenship from all of us, this individual action that ultimately no amount of policy or technology can obviate the requirement for that individual to arise, although it can facilitate it. And this is where that final challenge to sort of translate that vision into action through sort of those commitments and being animated by a sense of hope. Because obviously, if you do not have that hope, you will not act. But if you do believe it's possible, then you'll make that effort and you'll put what's needed. And so your presentation is indeed a validation of the basis for hope and the requirement to act. So thank you very much, Marina, for a beautiful frame that I think sets the stage very well to welcome Roy Steiner, the Senior Vice President for the Food Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation, where he leads a team focused on creating access to nourishing food for millions of people in the US and around the world, supporting scientific advances in human nutrition and sustainable food production, carrying forward the Foundation's enduring commitment to a sustainable green revolution in Africa. And I have had the privilege of having met Roy before, and I know that his trajectory and impact when it comes to addressing the challenges of food and agriculture around the planet are truly outstanding. And so it's with a great sense of privilege that I welcome Roy to share his perspectives. Welcome.
Thank you, Ishmael. It's a pleasure to be here. And I just wanted to say I really appreciated Mariana's points. And I do think, COVID, as everybody has mentioned, is really an opportunity to build a more equitable and sustainable system. But in order to do that, I think it's important to also understand what exactly has happened. And so I thought I might just talk a little bit about kind of a perspective about the food system and what the Rockefeller Foundation is doing, but also some of our health work specifically and what kinds of transformation, both digital and other, could be helpful. So as you know, what is interesting from a food perspective is that COVID actually began with a food choice, right? If somebody decided to eat something, and it turns out that that's probably, if you do true cost accounting, the most expensive meal that has ever been eaten by human beings. The external cost of making that food choice resulted in the entire economy of the world shutting down a few months later. And I think it's an example of that interconnectedness that I think both Ishmael and Mariana talked about. Is that you can't just think in a very isolated way. You need to understand those connections. And what that triggered in food is, as everybody knows, incredible amounts of food was wasted because the supply and demand just wasn't connected. We have systems that just truly aren't resilient. We've created some very efficient supply chains, but efficiency came at a price of resilience, and it really revealed the fact that we don't have the data and the digital solutions to create these food systems that really can link and meet the needs of people effectively. We also saw that actually in the United States, entire meat packing plants all broke down, and suddenly there was because of COVID. And suddenly there were meat shortages throughout the entire country. And it's also disrupted, incredible amounts of farm workers, etc. I think the bans, we avoided some of the initial worst impacts. When people get afraid, they close their borders. That did happen in about 13 countries. But in general, it was a lot less than in the food crisis of 2008. And to some extent, that's another example where we really need better information. So we've been putting in kind of food balance sheets, helping African countries in particular, just understand how much food is in the country, so that you are making decisions based on truth and the facts rather than on fear. And I think we're in a world where everybody makes a lot of decisions based on fear, and that inevitably turns out to be bad. This food crisis did trigger a health crisis in many places. As you know, 300 million children in the world rely on school meals, and with not going to school, suddenly they no longer have access to the most often, for many of them, the most nutritious meal of the day. In the US and other places, we've seen these incredible long lines of people waiting in line at food banks, etc. And we're actually seeing that the number of people with acute hunger is now doubling to about 265 million. So the incredible sustainable development goals that Mariana talks about, we have dropped back 10, in some cases, 20 years and towards those goals. And it really is forcing us to this is a rupture in the system that is probably on par potentially with World War II and the Great Depression, if you really look at kind of the amount and number of people that have been affected. And as a result, it requires an even greater response to address it if we're going to be effective at doing that. We have been looking at different responses. As I mentioned, better data, digital data is going to be critical to that. But we can put into place one of the most astounding pieces of information we found out is 94% of the hospitalizations and deaths in the United States, and I think this is true for many other countries, are the result of underlying chronic, in most cases, diet-related, and age-related reasons. So 94% is because we have bad diets, right? Like if we actually were healthy, if we actually had healthy diets, COVID would potentially really just be a flu. But because we have so many people who are unhealthy, that we've created a food system that is slowly killing us and is actually damaging our health. 60 to 70% of all diseases now are diet related. Diet is now the #1 risk for early mortality. And so we've created a system that just doesn't make sense. It's the #1 emitter of greenhouse gases and the #1 cause of early mortality. So as Marina said, this is a moment in time where we can address that and just really do some significant shifts in how we all the things Marina talked about, subsidizing how we what kind of research, what kind of systems we put in place. The digital technology dimension of this, I think, is very interesting. Obviously from a health point of view, the Rockefeller Foundation really did recognize that testing and getting information into the system is absolutely critical. It's a little embarrassing that the United States had no testing plan. And we as a foundation actually had to bring the experts of the country together to actually develop one, which is another indication that we have, in many cases, an abdication of responsibility in many of the world's governments to really be thoughtful and act in the public interest. And getting that reliable information for effective prevention and control is very powerful. I mean, we actually have examples of a number of countries who've done this very well, including China, where this first originated, is now almost back to normal because of the information that they've been able to harness. And we need to be able to do that in a way that's safe and preserves privacy. And there's all these tensions there that are important. And I think it's also, as Marina said, it's important to help citizens understand. Like, we have to have citizens engaged in this and have access to knowledge and information, and the digital solutions that people are proposing have incredible potential for really enabling citizens to act, as well as enabling actionable insights. I know my time is probably up, Ishmael, is that correct? Should I close shortly?
Okay, you have 5 more minutes.
Okay, great. And then, the other things that I think we've been working a lot on is also the teleconsultation, telehealth. Suddenly, because everybody's forced to be isolated, you've seen an incredible move to virtual, as we all are. And it'll be interesting to see how many of those things stick. I think some of those things will stay around and fundamentally change the way we travel and have offices. And other places, I still think we need human beings to look face to face and touch each other and hug, and we're all desperate for that. But I think there's going to be an interesting shift where there's going to be a lot of hybrid work there that enables, I think, more efficient and effective, and that's going to be harnessing the digital technologies. I'll end with just two things that I think are kind of interesting for us from another food perspective. Is we have invested quite a bit in creating a food system dashboard, because everything is connected. Working with the Global Alliance for Nutrition and John Hopkins, etc., putting together, and maybe I can share the slide. oh, I can't. If you go to food system dashboard with GAIN, you'll find it. And it's really, I think, an example of how getting system data enables you to understand the system in a way we just have never been able to do it, because we never had the digital technologies. We didn't have the big data. We didn't have the artificial intelligence to start looking at incredibly complex patterns and discern insights. That is, as many of you know, is dependent on good data. And the other major project we have is to make sure that the data that's being used to drive artificial intelligence actually represents the countries and the people that need that. Too often we train artificial intelligence on a very limited amount of data that's European and American white people. And we need to develop data that's relevant to Africa, that is, and creating a data commons that enables artificial intelligence to really serve everyone and not just the wealthy in the world. And so that's I think I'll leave it on that note around equity. I think that's the big theme that we need to put at the forefront. We are living in a world that's increasingly inequitable. COVID has shown that, and we need to build in systems and the digital technologies that can reverse that. And that will not happen by itself. That's going to take intention. So with that, I'll leave it and hand it back to you, Ishmael.
Thank you very, very much. That was fantastic and truly illuminating as well. And it seems to be that there are a number of things that emerge from that. I'll return to that in a second. I understand that Marina has to leave us. I'm really grateful you were able to make it. And thank you so much for your presentation. We will carry on without you. But of course, when it comes to sharing the event, etc., it will go back through those channels. So thank you very much, Marina, for a wonderful contribution.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Roy. So it seems to me that among the themes that you touched on there, somewhere around this element of regression, I suppose, of the fact that actually the system, our global system, reflects inequalities that extend everything from income to health, which has been a theme. I think Emilia raised it, Marina raised it as well. But I think you very dramatically identified how actually in food in particular, we move back 20 years in some ways. And that in many ways, a crisis like this one exposes and magnifies those tensions, those cracks. Without COVID, we go about with, already certain burdens from that inequality, but suddenly a massive stressor comes into the global system, and those inequalities create fractures that are truly severe in so many ways. So the will needed to go there, as you talked about, an abdication of responsibility. So the need to take responsibility, to be prepared from the various governments of the world in particular, but also stakeholders and individuals, clearly is a theme. And another one seems to be, which is of course the subject of today's roundtable, is that technology has a great role to play in facilitating that transition toward more equitable systems, and likewise in perpetuating highly inequitable systems, and that being able to embrace and partner with technology to address those needs, but also transform it, whether it be through the data or the supply chains or the problem solving that we have, is equally critical. So thank you very, very much. I think this has created quite a lot of consensus, but also a set of challenges for everyone. I would like to do two things. One is open it up so that if anyone among the attendees has any questions, please put it into the group chat and ensure that it's addressed to everyone. And we will take those questions. But in addition, this event has been envisaged not just for the immediate audience of those who can make it right now live, but really for the audiences that will consume this event that are interested in these issues more broadly. And some of those audiences have raised questions with us for the panelists. So one of there's two key questions that we have already, in addition to any that any attendees might raise. But let me share my screen for the very first question, which is, from your perspective, you each, Emilia and Roy, are in touch with a wide range of stakeholders, and you really do have a finger on the pulse globally. And once we have identified that technology is not the sole solution, or maybe even the primary solution to the challenge of COVID recovery and crisis response and crisis preparedness, I think we have also identified that it is a key stakeholder and a key player, and that digital transformation or its absence is a mediator on many of the impacts. If we have the right technology, the right data, the right platforms for citizen engagement, really the severity of a crisis like this would be dwarfed. And conversely, if we don't have it, or if we have it in an inequitable way, then the severity of this can be magnified. So from your standpoint, from where your promontory, where you're seeing sort of the world and stakeholders, let me go to you first, Emilia. Sort of as you look at the local authorities in this global perspective, what would be for you the top priorities for local authorities in terms of digital transformation in this COVID recovery and second wave stages that we seem to be facing?
Thank you very much, Ismail. I also would like to react briefly to Roy, because some of the things that he has said about the food system are something that we can also apply to other systems in general. I mean, we are faced with a food system, the broad worldwide system of food, which is not actually meant to feed people. It's meant to consume. It's very different perspectives. So people consume, but they are not properly fed, and some people cannot consume actually, so they are hungry. So that democratic access to food, the proximity perspective of food production and consumption is extremely important. And in this urban era, it will be very critical for cities to start playing a different type of role in that food system. The same you can apply to IT, actually. I mean, I know I am simplifying things, but it's easier to simplify and then approach it from different angles. IT has been developed to a very large extent also as a consumption issue and not as a governance issue. And so people trust IT and the lack of borders, and they give all types of information to buy a toothbrush, an electrical toothbrush, but they are not willing to provide the same type of information to government. And this is a complex situation for any government, and if we want IT to be to play a different role in the recovery, we will need to address this. And the reason for this is the inequalities that are persistent in the system, and the fact that we have accepted inequalities as something that, well, that's just the way it is. So they are part and parcel of how we govern, how our cities are designed, how our territories are defined. And we will need to address this. And at the beginning, in my initial remarks, I was saying, we need to face the informality aspect of all of this. It goes beyond the fact that we will need to use data differently and protect data. that we will need to have good data and also define what good data is. Who decides what good data is? Is that national government or is it communities? We have a very interesting exercise in Africa working with Slum Dwellers International on Know Your City. Most of our mayors do not know the informal part of their city correctly, right? I mean, you identify with that, Roy, I see. So, I mean, who is going to help define what data is? And that variable of informality will be very critical in moving forward for a true technological inclusive transformation. So for me, this is a very, very high priority that we need to look at. And then there is a level of transparency, just like we faced in the financial crisis, that people, and now we see that people do not longer accept this famous word, oh, the markets are too complex and nobody understands them. We want to understand them. We want to understand the algorithms now. We also need to understand those. And it will be part of the very difficult job of local authorities, because those are the ones that are going to be providing services based on algorithms which are very, very close to people. So for the champions among those cities living in the formality world with access, where access is solved, the transparency around algorithms and data and privacy will be critical. For the other bigger part of the world where access is not solved, is the definition of rights, is the definition of accessibility, and the definition of data that is going to be very, very important. So, I mean, of course, there are many other priorities, but if you look at the work that the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights is doing, which is working within United Cities and local governments, these are very important things, and they need all to be translated in ethical digital standards and new digital rights, and the definition of digital service provision. So this is where we are. Where we are starting to work not only among cities, exchanging practices, but also with the private sector to change the conversation around it. But I think that the international community and the development partners need to come into this. I mean, it's time now. We can no longer think development without this aspect, and we are to a very large extent. I mean, I was fascinated by the presentation of Roy around food systems, which I think are going to play a very important role in policy making in the coming couple of years. But I don't see enough of this yet in the international debate on development, the bigger debate.
Would it be fair to say, Emilia, in terms of what you've just said, that one of the priorities is a space where these different stakeholders dialogue strategically? Because in a sense, what you are describing requires all these different stakeholders to have some kind of unity of vision and implementation capacity. The ability, you need to, if you want to involve the citizens in deciding what's good data, you need to have a channel for that, but you also need to have the people who are sort of generating the data and applying the data, the technology partners, etc., around that table, and be able to plan those things and discuss those things together. Would it be fair to say that those spaces are not yet there as sort of richly as they need to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the United Nations system has tried to open up some of these spaces, but it didn't go far enough in terms of IT. It was very often about high tech, and then you had the Global South talking about low tech, but there was not the type of conversation that we are having now. And I agree with Marina. COVID is facilitating the shift because suddenly we are seeing the broader picture, all of us, and we all see that the weakest among us is what what reflects our possibilities to go forward into development. So I think you are right. These spaces as a whole for all the stakeholders do not exist. I still believe that the United Nations can play a very, very important role here, also in their partnership with the World Economic Forum. And we at United Cities and local governments are pushing for a town hall process that implies a pact between local governments and communities. We think we need to start there to create a joint narrative about expectations and dreams, like Marina was saying, so that we then can have a true dialogue with the private sector. And I think the private sector needs to join us at the very beginning of these deliberations as well. So I think we shouldn't be waiting around to be given a very big forum where everybody is there. I think we need to push for the different constituencies to talk about this. But if the question is, do we have that space? I would say no. All of us are trying to build that a little bit. I mean, this is one of those spaces. I've been at the Rockefeller Foundation before, where we have discussed some of these things. You can do that as United Cities and local governments as well. But are we all gearing in the same direction towards a true transformation proposal? No, then we might not have it. And that is also part of the fact that the whole technology issue is quite weak in the Sustainable Development Goals. It could be much stronger, right? I think we need to change the approach and the narrative about this within the 2030 agenda, because what you miss in the SDGs might not be missing in the 2030 overall objective. So I would be happy to explore that with you and partners.
Fantastic.
I think I can follow up on so what Amelia said around you need, in order to figure out what kind of digital technologies or any activities, you actually need a vision, and you need to have people bringing together to figure that out. You can't let technologies drive you. You have to you have to actually ask what you want society to be, and so what I just want to share, we did an interesting exercise. We looked at all the books and movies about the future, and there's several hundred of them, and it's interesting that 98% of them are dystopian. They're very dark. It's Hunger Games, Mad Max. It just keeps going on. Those really terrible futures, right? And 98%, like, it's really vastly. So we become incredibly good at describing the world we don't want. We're actually quite bad at describing the world we actually want. And there's a problem there, because there's this the passage in the Bible that says, where there is no vision, the people perish. I think we're in a culture that's at risk of perishing because we are not investing the time, resources, and creativity to create a very powerful vision that can drive action. We are driven primarily by fear and by negative rather than the positive. In response to that, we actually launched something called the Food System Vision Prize, which turns out no one has ever given a prize for a vision before. Lots of prizes for innovations, but not for a future vision. At least the one, we couldn't come across one, which was interesting in and of itself. Like, we really are vision starved. And it was interesting, 1,300 groups all over the world started developing these visions, and we just selected the top 10. But we wanted visions at local levels, and that's where it's powerful. The challenge with the Sustainable Development Goals, they're very broad, general, and a lot of people can't necessarily connect. Well, what does that mean for me in my community? These visions were visions about what the food system could look like in 2050 if we make. And I think that ended up galvanizing lots of really interesting activities. And I think we need more of that I think it's important to have a dystopian story every once in a while, because that creates fear and some energy. But that alone is not going to drive the creativity that we need to figure out the society we want. And then what are the technologies we need to achieve that society, versus here are the technologies and it's going to create something we don't want, right? So anyway, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. And to address this question myself as well, I think this discussion really frames it for me in many ways, because it seems to me that there is a disconnect, often structural, between the global and the local level. So if you have a fantastic discussion and framework at the local level, the people that we're interacting with in local authorities, they're not part of that global policy process. The people who are making the decisions on how to react to COVID-19, they're, their boss's boss on one department pushes the SDGs, but they're trying to say, how do I deal with X or Y? And they're problem solving. And what we found in our interactions is that there was very much a distinction between those local authorities. That's what I meant kind of by that strategic approach. Those who had a vision of where they wanted to go, and they engaged with us in a very different way. They are discussions about not so much what product do we buy from you, but how do we get to this point? And can you help in this way? And that sort of had the kind of results that I shared for that one case study, where suddenly services dramatically improved all over through one application of our process, but it was really that process of consultation. So to me, in a sense, one of the top priorities going forward at this global level is for actors like yourselves. I was very excited by the participants, by the panelists, who are in the privileged position of having a foothold both at the global and at the local level, to facilitate exchanges that are fine-grained enough that the people we talk to at the local authority level are interested in, on how do we problem solve X, Y, and Z, but benefit from the participation of stakeholders around the world. And that learning becomes quite powerful. So I think there is a possibility out there for that. And I agree likewise. I think we seem to be arriving at very similar themes, that requirement for vision to be translated into collaboration and to be integrated in both. And the awareness, I think, of those who are missing out, because we cannot do everything. For example, the point about individuals trusting some companies with their data, but not some governments. It was very interesting. Estonia have digitized virtually everything. So all of their, health systems, etc. And one of the things that they identify as what allowed them to do that was a high level of trust in government from their population. So for us, for example, as technology providers, the role that working with local governments, in some cases, the preference is you do it and we will facilitate the contact. And in other areas, the preference is coming to the table and let's do it together. And it depends very much on those contexts that we do not control. But having those conversations right at the beginning is what I think is missing, is having the private sector, the technology sector, the local sector, the community sector, envisioning together in an sort of at the level of operations is necessary. One last question that has been raised here from the chat is there a way we can see the solutions you have talked about that you have implemented within local authorities? So I suppose someone in the audience is asking for some kind of good practice example from local authorities, both from the Rockefeller Foundation and UCLG, if you have any.
Well, let me start. We've got a new platform where you can actually visit the exchanges that we have had with over 60 hours of live learning experiences, conversations among local governments on the key topics to overcome the pandemic. And technology is one of them. I will put the link in the chat. And those live learning experiences are going to be now moving on. They were focusing on listen to cities, please listen to us. We are doing things and we need to do this together. And we're going now into this series of cities are listening, our cities are listening to communities are building with you. There is an interactive platform, you can visit there. And Cities for Global Health is the other platform where you can see many things that are being done around technology, but also around housing or food or other things documented by cities themselves. And I will bring this in the chat in a moment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Roy, do you have an example?
Well, it sounds like Amelia has many examples that can solve that. For us, it's just, I think there's, cities have been, we had something called the 100 Resilient Cities Network, which, is a great example of how cities are identifying issues and then putting in like a chief resilience officer and then implementing response to climate change. For us, one of the big things was just the food waste, how much food is wasted in cities and what can be done to do that. And some cities have been able to reduce food waste 30 to 40% by just implementing some very simple things in restaurants and then getting composting in place and creating more of a circular economy in a way that is really very powerful. And there's lots of very good examples of that. So if you look up 100 Resilient Cities, you'll see that as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And on our part, I think I've described some of the kind of applications that we've used. We actually will have a kind of, if somebody does want a specific example, we have a demo coming up on Tuesday and Thursday. So I think it is. I'll triple check in case I'm giving the wrong information. But if anyone does want to see how our local authorities actually are implementing this and what kind of applications might be relevant, then just let us know in the chat or directly, and we will invite you to that demo so you can have a more detailed perspective. And with that, I think we've concluded our time. I am very, very grateful. This has been extremely promising, and there are some openings I saw Emilia suggested there for further conversations after this, which is exciting. Emilia has raised, or I shared Emilia's links with everyone. One for the citiesforglobalhealth.org, and the second one for the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights. It's on the chat if you want to go there. Suffice to say that for me, one of the things that is heartening is the unity of vision that emerged in this panel, is that we represent really very diverse kind of stakeholders and organizations, but we do seem to be reading reality in a similar way. And that bodes well in that respect, notwithstanding the serious challenges ahead. So thank you.
I have to say, Ismail, that this was not always the case. So I think there is evolution is something that we need to not only to celebrate, but to build on. Only a couple of years ago, our conversations would have gone in very different directions. So thank you very much for this. It has been a pleasure. Let us build further.
Fantastic. And I think one of the ways in which we'll do this will be by sharing this event with our respective networks, so that we will be able to put it on YouTube, and then we'll be able to share it. And hopefully the dialogue will go, plus we can then follow up after this. But either way, it's a source of that hope that Marina was talking. Thank you, Emilia, for that. Roy, any final words?
No, thank you very much, Ishmael.
Great.
Pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you to all the attendees, and all the very best. See you on YouTube.
Bye, thank you.